Hello, beautiful and amazing people. Welcome back to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host, Todd Cave, and this is podcast 34. On this episode, I was a guest on Brandon Kroll's podcast, and we took a deep dive into the Bible and becoming the Christ. And even though Brandon and I are on completely different sides of the understanding of religion, what is Christ, and our views on the Bible, I must say that he was quite respectful and he gave me an opportunity to speak, and I also did the same for him. And I think it was a good representation for people to see that even though you and someone could have opposite views on topics, you don't have to get into all the name calling and spewing vitriol. And at the end, I thought he was fair, and I think that he has a different understanding from me, and I respect that, even though I completely disagree on most things. But I think that this was a good conversation for people, and you can hear how two people who disagree with each other actually have a good conversation. If you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246, and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned, because we have some more great content coming soon.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You got to be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix, because there's so many levels and layers to it,
Hey everybody, I am on tonight with another guest. First one was Heidi Love. Tonight I'm going to be talking with Todd Cave, who's a friend of Janet Deplorable, the podcaster. She's recommended him quite highly, as he is well-versed in many topics. He's already been helping me very graciously this evening with a lot of tech questions and such, and even getting this episode off the floor. We're pretty much going to be just shooting it off the hip. We're just going to be very open, freestyle. I kind of like that as a format with the Man of Daily Podcast Chats. What I'm going to just trying to do is just create an environment where it's fun, it's an interview, it's conversation, kind of see what other people think about stuff in the world. So nice to meet you, Todd. How are you, and where are you from? I noticed you have an accent.
Hello, brother. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm happy to be here. And yes, Janet did highly recommend you as well. And I was actually born in Barbados, so
Okay.
hence why I have a bit of a Caribbean accent. But I also spent almost half of my life in the UK, so there's still some British mixture.
Nice.
And I used to be a civil engineer for many years, and what happened is that I used to work with a lot of Irish, Scottish, and Geordie, which are people from Newcastle. So I've picked up some of their twang as well. So I'm a bit of a mixed bag in terms of, because the thing is, in the UK, we have a lot of foreigners. So basically what that means is that a lot of people don't speak English as their first language. So I've had to learn to tweak slightly how I speak, so that is clearer, flatter, and easier for people to understand. So doing that for so many years, it just comes in okay, I'm going to go back into work mode and speak like that. And then when they speak to English audiences, then not as much British accentuation or Irish accentuation, but just flatter, and they pronounce the THs and stuff like that. So
I love how you're able to like mix with like it's like a bilingual aspect. You're able to adapt. Like, okay, I'm talking to this kind of person, so I adapt with that. That's cool.
yeah, basically. And I'm also fluent in Spanish and Portuguese. So
Oh,
yeah, so basically, I understand how foreigners feel speaking English. So this is how come I've tailored how I speak English to non-natives, so
right.
that it's easy for them to understand. Because a lot of people say, "Oh, Todd, I can understand you really well, but how come is that? Because you used to live in England." And it's like, well, then I have to tell them, well, that is the reason. Like, oh, wow, okay, okay. So I'm all
Well,
around like a mixed bag, you know.
well, with me, I was working at a production place, and they have somebody from all over. I told my mom I was like working at the UN, and the guy that was my trainer was a Jamaican for the second half of my stuff, and I was like, I can't understand a thing that he's saying. And another first guy was Ukrainian. They threw me over to the Jamaican. I'm like, I can't understand half these people. But as the years went by, I learned to speak with an accent. I broke up my sentences. I was able to understand. Like a new guy would come in, I'd be like, oh, he means this. And I learned, Todd, that I really love international communities. I love the teasing and the camaraderie. I can tell the flair just off of nationality, like how somebody thinks and what they're passionate about. And yeah, I absolutely love how you are able to speak two languages. That's one thing I was not able to do. Um, so you say you were born in Barbados. Is that a French colony or a British colony?
It used to be a British colony.
British colony. Okay. Okay. So we were talking a little bit prior to the show that you're into international politics, and I think this is a great segue. What is your opinion? Um, Kind of being in the European, right in the midst of between America and Middle East and stuff like that. You're seeing a bit of an influx with the immigration aspects of things. I've seen other people with a little bit more of a racial perspective on everything. And then I've seen other individuals that are equating it similar to what's going on south of the border in America and stuff like that. What's your take on all of that? What's your perception in the world at large? Do you think that's planned? Do you think that's something like you can't really help it? Just your personal insights.
So my research is showing me that this is all by design. And what they're doing is they're following something called the Kalergi Plan, which I can't remember the guy's first name, but I think he's half Austrian, half Japanese. And I think he was around the 1800s from memory. And basically what he said, he created sort of like a plan or ideology. But long story short, he's saying that in the not so distant future, all of Europe will be like, I think he used this word like mongrels, meaning mixed, right? So what it is now is that there has been a concerted effort to not have Europe full of Europeans. And there's been a plan from with things like the Barcelona Declaration, the Morocco Declaration as well, where countries behind the scenes have signed up to these declarations, and they have decided that they will flood their countries with non-white immigrants. Now, the thing is that what tends to happen is that people get a little bit, what shall I say? Their speech becomes very extreme, and their thoughts become extreme when you raise such sensitive topics. But what I tend to do is I tend to refer to history. I refer to documents, people, and things that have been said and done in the past that have created the future that we're in now.
Right.
So what it is now is that Europe has tended to be ahead of the United States by maybe 10 to 20 years for all of these things. So our issues started mainly after because we always had immigration in Europe,
Right.
but we have had a massive labor governments, which would be equivalent to the Democrats on your side of the pond, to have immigration. Now, the thing is that immigration is not a bad thing.
Right.
So you find that some people on the right tend to get their panties in the twist when talking immigration, but immigration is not a bad thing. But what it needs to be done is that it needs to be specific in terms of like, okay, we have these jobs, we want to create these vacancies. We don't have the skills for these vacancies, so we import highly skilled migrants,
Right, right.
right?
Same like with Mexico harvesting. Yeah.
And what that would do now is that will allow businesses to level up and the country to level up. But what happened is that was used with, okay, in the beginning it was with good intentions, but the plan was always to flood. So
Right.
what happened is that you get people accustomed to immigration through the guise of highly skilled migrant programs, and then over time you gradually lower the bar lower and lower and lower and lower until you get a situation now where like you
Over
had
influx.
yes, you had the migrant crisis in Europe, where you had political leaders like Angela Merkel just telling people, "Come, just come, we'll take care of you." You know what I
Right.
mean? And using a lot of emotions and a lot of propaganda videos and pictures to change the mood of people. Because what's happened is that the rulers of the world have known for a long time that it is very easy to influence people through their emotions. So what they do now, instead of us using the left side of our brain for certain things, they've gone past all logic and they try to make us think completely emotionally, right?
Yes, impulsive. Yeah, 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 yeah.
So what this is why they have dramatic imagery, they have dramatic rhetoric that they use. It is all to stir emotion. And we have lost the ability to use rational, logical thinking in order to make the choices. So this is why they would play videos of. I remember, I think it was this girl that had died or drowned like that, trying to cross the Mediterranean to get into Europe, and that is what caused and triggered the massive influx. And what has happened is that Europe as a whole has taken in so many immigrants that, and then you have other countries like Sweden who were super leftist that
Mm.
didn't even go that far in terms of just tell come in. They would just be like opening their borders for refugees to just come. So
Right.
instead now of like they turning up at the border, countries like Sweden would just allow them to come in, and just claim asylum and then give them citizenship. And then their children who will be first generation Swedish. But what has happened is that they've tended to import Islamic people. Now, this is the thing. Muslim people are good people,
Hmm.
but the problem is that the ideology does not allow them to think outside of the box. And to be fair, most religions on earth are like that, where
Right.
a lot of people
Right.
are not able to think outside the box. So this is why I always tell people that religion itself, organized religion, is
Yes.
actually very bad for humanity because it causes you to think in the box. And the box thinking has come from my interpretation from the Emerald Tablets, where Thoth said that you must avoid the dark brothers because they move in angles and corners. And if you look at a box has angles, corners. So
Hmm.
when you put yourself into a box, you're putting yourself in an angle or quarter. And he said that you need to move or think in arcs and circles. So if you have like a point, you can go around the point, right?
Right.
And if that thing turns out to be true in the future, you can come back to it. But when you have box thinking or you move in angles and corners, you have yourself trapped, regardless on if that thing is right or wrong, because truth only becomes truth only becomes false when new information is received, learned, or understood that it negates what you think was true. So this is why I always tell people that if you want to really learn and improve your knowledge, you need to put the things that you think are true on the shelf. So what do I mean by that? If you put things on the shelf, it means that you're allowed to learn things that are new. And if those things that you learn new come from the things that you knew in the past, you just take those things off the shelf and you put them back inside of you. But if the things that you learn in now turned out to contradict the things that you thought were true, and you have evidence, you have confirmations, it is undeniable, you just leave that thing on the shelf and go away from it, right? But what it is now is that we have religion, which comes from the Latin word relegare, which means to hold or to bind or to thwart forward progress of. So you have religion being the mental slavery of humanity, right? This is why I have coined the term that the three major religions that create the matrix and rule the world are the religion of money, which came out of Babylon, the religion of government, which also came out of that area, and organized religion, which also came out of that region, right?
Yes.
So this is why I always say that those three main religions are the religions that thwart and hold back the progress of humanity. So what it is now is that, getting back to the migrants and Islam, you have a people that have a completely different culture to the Europeans.
Right.
Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing, but what it is now is that the policies that our Western governments, the European governments, and the United States are doing is that they're importing people who are diametrically opposed to their way of life. Now, if now you had it where you allow highly skilled Muslim workers to come in, it means that you give them and your country time to assimilate to each other, right? Because as the famous saying goes, when in Rome, you do as the Romans do. But if you're just in saturating your country, places like Ireland now, you know what I mean? It's all over Europe, where you're just bringing people every year. There's no assimilation. People are not even learning the languages, right? And then the governments are bending over backwards to provide and take care of those people while neglecting their own citizens is a bit of a travesty, in my opinion, because those people that are citizens, whether they're naturalized or born in that country, have worked to put into the system, and they can't get anything out because those tax dollars are paying for people that never contributed anything or sometimes have nothing in common with you, but yet still your government is supporting them. So this is why I say that you find that the rhetoric on both sides tends to be extreme. And to be fair, I think that is also by design, because they don't want people that sort of like in the middle thinking, where like, okay, some elements of compassion and kindness are good, and then some other elements of taking care of your people are good. So in reality, you can have a mixed system where you can have the people that actually genuinely are asylum seekers, like genuine asylum seekers. Then you can have genuine immigration, where it's like, okay, we need skilled people, so we don't care where they're from, as long as they don't have a criminal record, let them come, they can work, bring their families, etc. But what we have is one or the other. Is like all compassion, just bring people regardless of the cost or the consequences. And then you have other people that no, don't bring any people at all. And then there are actually situations where you do need people to help out, right? So both are actually counterproductive, right? So this is why the system never actually improves and people's lives never get better, because we have two extremes. So this is by design, because while both sides are fighting each other, they are actually doing the work for the controllers.
Yes.
And in my humble opinion, the Anunnaki, the extraterrestrials, who, by the way, look like us, because it says that we're made in the image of God, but I'll elaborate more on that in a little bit. But they are still running this planet, but they're running it through their bloodlines. Their bloodlines are the heads of state, the aristocrats, the politicians, the central bankers. They're also the monarchies. They're all of those, because in the book of Enoch, it is very clear that the fallen angels, who are, in my humble opinion, the Anunnaki. Same thing.
Yes. Yep.
They came here, and when you read the Sumerian tablets, it said that they mixed their essence, as they call it, literally their essence, aka their DNA, with the existing hominid species that was on Earth.
Yes.
And then that mixture produced then at the time called the giants, and those will be what people would call the Nephilim. But my research is indicating that the Nephilim are just another word for the Anunnaki. The Greeks call them the Archons. Other people, in the book of Enoch, they call them the Watchers.
Yes.
I think it's the same group of people. And the Anunnaki simply means those from heaven to earth came. My research has shown me that the Anunnaki are not just necessarily one, say, race of extraterrestrials. They seem to be a collection, some that have come from the Draconian star system, Sirius, Orion, and the Pleiades, right? So there is not just one group, because there are some reptilians in there that are actually positive. But just like
the variants of cryptids,
it's just like you can have good people in the United States and bad people in the United States. You have good people in England, you can have bad people in England. Because what happens is that we tend to just focus on extremes. That's how we've been conditioned. And we also tend to focus on like subgroups and basically broad brush paint a group of people, right? So you can say, oh, all white people are bad, all black people are bad. No, some black people are good, some white people are bad, some black people are bad, some white people are good. It depends on the character and what's in the heart of the person. But what we have been conditioned is to be polarized. So while we're fighting each other, we are not realizing that the rulers of this world are causing us to do the work for them. So while we fight each other and we kill each other out, when we are exhausted and we're tired, they will come in and pick up the pieces, further crash the system, and then enslave us further. This is why at this time, what people are not realizing is that the agenda is to get us to insert microchips into our body, mostly into our brain, so that we ended up merging with the AI cloud, becoming the Borg, and uploading our consciousness as well, right? So this is what they want. But in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, Thoth actually taught us and told us how to reincarnate, how to transfer your consciousness from one avatar body to the next. Because guess what, folks? The movie Avatar was just a documentary of when the Anunnaki went to another planet, aka Earth. So the humans went to another planet to try to, colonize that planet, just like the Anunnaki did to Earth, right? So that was actually a documentary. And then in the end, you saw how he transferred his consciousness from one body to the next through the machine. That is exactly what's taught in the Emerald Tablets. And there's another book called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which also explains in detailed fashion how to choose your appearance, how to reincarnate, what sex you're going to be. It's super detailed. So we know that incarnation is real, because even Christ spoke about reincarnation, and the early church actually spoke of reincarnation. And the people of the first early church in the first couple hundred years never called themselves Christians. They called themselves followers of the way, because Christ said, I am the truth, the way, and the life. In the Tanakh, Hebrew, is actually one word, Torah, Torah, Torah. So that translated to the way, the truth, and the life. So he actually spoke, because he reincarnated. Because if you think about it, when the disciples saw Christ, they didn't know it was him, because he had a different face, because he reincarnated in a different body, because that body was taken away because they didn't find a body. And then he put his consciousness into another avatar body, right? So people may want to disagree, but
that's where I would disagree. The only reason I say that is because the stuff I've tapped into. There's a doppelganger, Tammuz, Hermes, Thoth, Horus. I've tapped into the anthropology and history as well, and they believe regeneration, reincarnation, whereas Christ is coming back, being born again. Resurrection is a totally different thing. I would say maybe there was a little bit of a spiritual difference, but I think what they didn't appreciate because they have the Kabbalah tree of life, and they were over here like, well, you want to have a crown? Like in Latin, top of the Kabbalah tree of life, it's spiked crown, corona. That's what it means. And I was laughing because I'm like, well, that's what we have right now. And then their Antichrist figure that they or the Christ that they wanted was Melchizedek, which is at the very bottom. Again, the soul, the feet. I can't say I buy the reincarnation, regeneration thing because that would tap into this like Christ consciousness thing, and you could literally fill in the blank with Buddha, Muhammad, this person, and that's how they would unite all the world is over again religion, all the major religions, by using that kind of concept. It's a parody, not exactly a true story. What would you say to that?
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. And what I would say is that you have some good points in terms of Christ consciousness. And what we do know is that the word Christ means the anointed one. It means when you anoint yourself with the prana oil, which is the life source, right?
Yes.
And Buddha, you could be classified as a Christ because he had illumination, and it is just a consciousness. It's a way of being, and it is the ability of being able to control your thoughts and feelings and to operate both sides of your brain at the same time. Now, the reason why I talk about reincarnation is because I look at it this way. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth are much older than most information we have on Earth. We know that because Thoth was an Atlantean priest king who ruled Kemet, aka Egypt, for 16,000 years. This is in the Egyptian papyrus that says that. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth were found in Teotihuacan, Mexico in the 1920s, right? And he spoke in his tablets about, I walk as a man, but not like a man, right? He talks about transferring his consciousness into different avatar bodies. He says that each avatar body lasts about 100 years, and he has to keep them in a regeneration facility. And what he does is every 100 years, he transfers his consciousness from one avatar body to the next, which is why I highlighted that in the movie The Avatar. In the end, the guy transferred his consciousness from his body under that machine into the avatar that was being seen by the other race of beings, right? So, and like I said, when Christ, notice I didn't say Jesus because that's another topic, but when Christ appeared to his disciples, they didn't know it was him because he had a different face. He had a different body, right? He didn't have the same body that he had, right? This is why
the holes in his hands and in his feet.
I was just going to say that.
Okay, yeah, I'm curious.
Because he is in his God self, because Christ has the ability to be the God man, which is God inside of you that you tap into. He could actually manifest the holes in his hands to prove to them that it is him, but he had a different face, right? This is the thing. So this is why I'm saying that we don't have definitive proof that he did that, but when you look at we read between the lines and look at what it is, he actually appeared to other people as well, and they didn't know it was him, right? Because he transferred his consciousness. Because in fact, there have been many Christs. For example, Krishna was also a Christ, because the word Krishna in Sanskrit actually, well, let me rephrase that. The word Christos in Greek is translated to Christ in Latin, and Christos translated into Sanskrit is Krishna. This is why Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita that he is the Godhead Supreme Personality, right? So he is the expression of God. He's the personality. So in order to get into his God self, he had to go through the Christ. This is why he was invoking the I am, just like Christ was invoking the I am, because the I am is the God in you. right? This is why Christ's most powerful words were spoken through the I am, right? Because when you say I am, you are actually channeling the God essence and God power inside of you. So this is why Saint Germain, who is the writer of the I Am Discourse, the Magic Presence, Untold Mysteries, and the Ascension Master's Handbook, Ascended Master's Handbook, he talks about you when you use the I am, that thing has to manifest immediately because you are using the God power in you. So this is why when Christ always spoke his most powerful words, he spoke through the I am. This is what a lot of people don't get, right? So
Well, I would counter that. It's my opinion is very contrary to most Christians that believe in the triune aspect of what you're referring to. The Bible does hint that it is my only begotten Son. When Stephen the martyr is being stoned, he says, "I see God and the Son sitting on the right side of him." When he's being baptized, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." I think a lot of people aren't equating into that factor. Is that even with the I'm not sure if you're familiar with the communion ceremony, but in ancient Hebrew, that was a ceremony for a wedding. Is that the father would select a man in the village for his bride, bring him over. He'd have him drink of the wine if he accepted the contract and the daughter, and then they would hand it over to the daughter. And it was there where she could, say like, "I don't really approve of the match." They'd be like, "Fine, we'll go back to the drawing board. We'll find another suitor for you." But if she chose of it, that means I was accepting. I accepted the father's selection for me. And then the young man would go on to add on to the family house. And this is what Christ said to his disciples: "I go to prepare a place for you," or followers, "up in my father's house, heaven. If it were not true, I would have not said. So we're getting a lot of Christians are just saying, "Oh yeah, he died for me," blah blah blah. And if they're thinking of it in a Catholic sense, like you're consuming the actual body of Christ, whereas it's more of a marriage contract, because he refers to a lot of Christians as ecclesia, the body of Christ, and he refers to them as bridesmaids in there. I would say personally, I disagree with he was indwelled with God incarnate, because that would mean that God was dead for 3 days. And that just doesn't make sense to me, because if a God is dead, wouldn't all life cease to exist? Whereas if it's his son, you know what I'm saying? What's your thoughts with that?
okay, some interesting points. So let me see if I can remember everything. So the word begotten
Mm-hmm.
actually is no special term. Begotten actually means one of many, right? When you when you go to the
Yep.
etymology of the Hebrew word begotten, it actually means one of many. So what has happened is that through translation and manipulation, people have been hoodwinked to think that begotten means something special. But because it's a lot of play on words. So when they say, when in scripture it says, "Oh, I've given my only begotten son," that
Mm-hmm.
is really saying I've given. And it was actually, when you look at the original text, there was not only, only was inserted after. It just says begotten. Yeah, this is the thing. When you go back to the original Hebrew, only was never put in there. That's a mistranslation, and begotten actually means one of many. So this is why begotten has actually been used to the term Abraham as well. When you actually do the research, it just
Right.
means one of many. So it's not a special title. So what's happened is that we've been fooled to have this like, oh, well, he gave his son to die for us. Now, what I would say is that um, Christ, everything that is written in the Bible is not, how should I say it? Some of it is 100% true, some of it is allegory, and some of it is plain plagiarism and false, right? Now, the ability to read the scriptures is how to decrypt the information. So what it is now is that you point that you make about God dying is a very good point. But when people take the idea of worshiping the man and look at Christ as just an ascended master who came here to teach us how to escape the matrix, basically, right? Because he says very, very clear that he and the Father are one, and we and the Father are one, right? He actually says this very, very, very clearly. So he says, let me see if I can find exactly where that is. Right. So he says, if anyone looks at the high priestly prayer, what it would say is that Christ always spoke through the I am. That's why he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He also said, I am the resurrection and the life. So by speaking through the power of the I am, he was communicating through his God self, which each and one of us can do if we're committed to mastering our thoughts and feelings. So this is why we're saying that in order to read the Bible and these other scriptures, you need the decryption keys, which I'm going to try to do my best today to give you. So one of the major keys to understand the personality of Christ, the consciousness of Christ, is to read the book of John, which has most of Christ's words than any other book in the entire Bible, especially chapter 17, which is known as the high priestly prayer, which is the clearest text to show that the Son of Man, which is all of us. Now, fun fact for you, Thoth used to call himself the Son of Man. He was the teacher of all wisdom in Kemet, Egypt. And we know that Yeshua, the character who became the Christ, went to study in Egypt. And we know that because the Coptic Christians actually have a shrine and built a church on top of where he went and where he used to sleep and live. So this is a clearest sign that the Son of Man, which is all of us, are one with God, which is just like he was one with God. Now, I'm going to start from verse 17, and I'm going to stop so I can explain. He says, sanctify them in truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, so that I sent them into the world. And for their sake, I consecrate myself so that they, which means us, may also be sanctified in truth. Now, this is where it gets interesting. I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they may also be one, just as you, Father, are in me, and I am in you, that they may also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory that you have given me, I have given to them, that they may also be one, even as we are one. I in them, you in me, that they may also be perfectly one, so that the world may know that you've sent me and love them as you love me. So I say all that to say that he was actually showing that he and the Father are one. We are and the Father are one, and Christ is just the consciousness through which you access your connection with the Father, right? So what has happened is that we've been taught how to separate the two, because when you actually do more research, you realize that the creator of the universe, right, which is what we would call God, but in reality, even the word God is actually quite limiting in terms of its expression of what everything is. So if you look at the creator of the universe created the universe so the universe could create him, because in reality, God is actually genderless. He has no gender, right? Because when you go back to the Nag Hammadi text, Christ used to call God the mother, father God, because it is both sexes, both male and female, because of energy and consciousness, because you have to have a male and a female in order to co-create, etc. So what it is now is that when you look at the created universe, God, or it, as you would properly say it, created the universe. But because there was nothing in the beginning, the universe couldn't come from him, right? Because you need to have an acknowledgement of something for something to exist, right? So it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. People always argue, well, the chicken came before the egg, but in reality, both started together, because without the chicken, you can't get the egg. Without the egg, you can't get the chicken. This is where the understanding of the alpha and the omega comes from, where you can't have a beginning if there's no end. But there's a point at which both are intersecting and become one. So it's that intersection point where Christ was referring to, that he is in the Father is in him, so that us, when he says they, can be one with us. So what's happened is that we are actually God. Everything we see in this world is God. The trees are God, the plants are God, the animals are God, the fish are God, the water is God, everything is God, and so are we, right? But what it is that we've forgotten that we actually have this ability, this way we are called co-creators, because we are just fractals of God containing the whole of God, but in expressing ourselves in an individualized way so that consciousness can understand everything. So consciousness, which is the Father, created sort of like fractals and derivatives of himself to be able to understand everything in the universe. So it's just like extensions and fractals. So this is why you see like in one of the pyramids in Egypt, they have starfish on the roof, well, the ceiling. And a starfish is very unique. When you cut a starfish, that starfish becomes another starfish, but that starfish is the same starfish. It's not a clone, it's the exact same. So a lot of allegory has been put for us to find our way back to source, but we don't have the decryption keys to unlock this information. You understand?
Yes. Can I go over some stuff you said?
Yeah, sure.
When you mentioned begotten, I'm not 100% in your perspective, but I see what you're going with. I would veer, but when you're saying the begotten part, that was actually cool. I did not know about the only, but I'm saying when we're reading Genesis 6:4, it coincides with Book of Enoch, chapter 6, that the sons of God came down and had affairs with daughters of men. So, the heavens aspect that you mentioned. I laugh because similar to what you're relaying, we eventually get a portion in First John. It says, "Behold, what manner the love of the Father, that we saints, or those who are set apart in Christ or whatever, shall become sons of God." What I would veer is saying is that I think the fallen watchers were the ones that taught all of this stuff on top of Mount Hermon. They came down, and Thoth, which I would say is actually Nimrod's son Tammuz, is the one that translated this stuff. Now, he didn't use it for good. Contraire, this is where I would veer, is he was using it for bad, is all there ever was, ever will be, is here. I am God. I think that was number 5 of his 13 statutes that he wrote out on the Emerald Tablets. And that taps into Baphomet, which everybody automatically thinks is Satan. But I'm like, no, that phrase is not affiliated with him. It's affiliated with the the Trihermes. And when you're talking about being indwelled, I do tap into what you were seeing because I think a lot of Christians don't understand what it is. But I was laughing because we don't understand when the veil was ripped in two in the temple. What was that signifying? It was like you no longer need a priest to get dressed up in white like a bride to intercede for you between the Father and me, because now you get passages of greater is he that is within you than he that is of the world. Know ye not your body is a temple of the Lord. And he said to the Pharisees and stuff like that this temple will be torn down in 3 days and I will be back. And they're like, well, are you talking about the physical building? He's like, no, because now those who are actually choosing to follow me have access to get into heaven. Whereas the other ones, they're following this tradition of we can ascend to our own God. We don't really need to acknowledge a creator God. The only reason I would say that it veers contraire is there's no purpose for Christ if we are already God. And if we're already God, then how can we kill ourselves? And I know Hermes, I researched a lot into him. He was also known as a carrier or intermediator between realms, and he helped carry some of the souls to hell, which is the equivalent of Thoth or Thoth, whatever you want to call him by. So I'm just curious what your thoughts on that, because I know Osiris was the god of the underworld X, and you see a lot of the occult tapping into that. So if the occult are the bad guys and they believe in ascension, enlightenment, the all-seeing eye atop of the pyramid, Horus, call it whatever you will, how is that good if they're the baddies orchestrating everything? And then you have the opposite where it says, my kingdom is not of this world. And yet they're believing in this regeneration, reincarnation. What's your thoughts on that?
All right. So firstly, Nimrod would not be Thoth.
No, his son, sorry.
Nimrod is more aligned with Marduk, which is Baal, Baal, Beelzebub, Moloch, etc. Right? Mm-hmm. So Nimrod, according to the story, had sex with Mother Semiramis,
Yes.
and they
Yep.
produced a son.
Yep.
So the attributes of Nimrod more aligned with the attributes of Marduk. So I would say that it would not be Thoth. Thoth would more be the king of Salem or Melchizedek,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Because of the attributes, because signs and symbols are what rule the world. When you look at the symbols and the symbology, this is how you're able to differentiate.
Right.
And if I try to, how can I break down? Okay, so you have a point in terms of the way people think, but if you look at Christ, Christ is just what you would call a spiritual office. So what it is now, so let me explain. So your president is Joe Biden. He's the man Joe Biden, and he has an office of president of the United States.
Okay.
He's still Joe Biden, the man, but until there's an election, he will be also Joe Biden, the man, and the president of the United States. Right? Good. So the character that became the Christ 2,000 years ago, his name was Yehoshua or Yeshua or Yeshua, depending on what pronunciation you want to use.
Right.
And he became the Christ. And there was always the in front when you look at these texts.
Right.
So what that does is that it's a spiritual office, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what that is now is that it is a level of consciousness. So in that level of consciousness, you become an ascended master, because Christ was just an ascended master. He came here to teach us how to become like him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not to worship him, because, excuse me, this is what a lot of people fail to realize. Christ never said, worship me. Now, there's a lot of play on words where people try to say that he was God. And it is half truth, because like I said earlier, all of us are God, right? All of us have the essence of creation inside of us. All of us, right?
I would agree with the creation part. Yes.
Yes, because if you think about it, right? If the whole, right, has created everything.
Mm-hmm.
When you read books like Pista Sophia and the Nag Hammadi codices, you see that when the whole, God, universal consciousness, whatever word you want to use that tickles your fancy, he created the universe so that the universe would create him. Because if you think about it, if consciousness, God, was in the beginning and there was nothing else, in reality, in theory, he doesn't exist because there's nothing to confirm the existence, which is why I use the chicken and the egg, because you can't have a chicken without an egg, you can't have an egg without a chicken, and you can't have a beginning without an end. So God created the universe so the universe would create him, because you can't, or acknowledge, it's probably a better word, because if the universe doesn't acknowledge the presence of God, well, God would just be there, but God would really be not there, because there's nothing to confirm his presence.
Right.
So
well, that's where I would divide, where you were saying God is both male and female. I would say it was more so God is leaning towards masculine, but the world would be an equivalent of a womb.
Yes.
So therefore, I love the world so much, I gave my only begetting. So yeah.
So this is why you can't get the chicken without the egg, right?
Right.
So this is why I say that God is really male and female, but not like having genitalia, but in terms of the energetic aspect. Because like you said, the womb is the creator,
mm-hmm.
and then the thought, which is like the masculine part, is like willing existence, but it can't come into existence without being created and confirmed, right? So this is why both the masculine, correct, have to exist at the same time, right? Yeah. But we've been taught to fight in either the chicken or the egg, but realizing is actually both, right? And when those combined and created, it created the sun, which is all of us, which are fractals containing the whole. So let me explain that. If you go to the beach and you take a cup and you take some water out the ocean, mm-hmm. the water in the cup is still the ocean.
Right.
It has all of the attributes of the ocean. the same saline solution, the taste, the appearance. It's wet,
Right.
you know.
Right.
The water in the cup is the ocean, and our physical body will be like the representation of the cup, but the essence of God, the water, which is inside our body, the spirit, right? So you can't be of the whole, but not containing the whole. You understand?
Yes.
It's a fractal. It is not the whole in the sense of, because obviously the body of water is big. So obviously you can't say that it is the entire body, but
Right.
it is still the ocean because it has the exact same saline solution content, is the same color, it is wet, it has the same attributes. So
Right.
this is us. We contain the whole in us, but we're fractals. But because
So,
the universe is trying to learn everything, it created fractals of itself to express itself, to gather information about what's going on in the world. This is why you get the saying that God is omnipresent, all knowing, because it's through us that God knows everything, because we are God and God is us, right? But what it is that we've separated, we have been conditioned to think that, oh, I'm just this person in this meat suit and I'm so weak and feeble and so little, when in reality, no, we have all the power inside of us, right? And a lot of scripture actually says the kingdom is inside of you, the power of the universe is inside of you, right? We are still made of the same elements that made stardust and stars, right? All the elements are found inside of us. But what it is that we've lost our way and forgotten how to manifest, how to create instantaneously, how to have telepathy, how to have telekinesis. All of these are in our power to do, but we've forgotten, right? So this is why Christ
would
was
you?
saying, I am in
Right.
you and you are in me, and we are
Right.
really one.
What I would counter with that, because it's fallen world, and when you get the serpent's lie is that you shall ascend to be like gods. That's tapping into like Isaiah 14:14, when Lucifer said, I will ascend to become the God most high. And you mentioned the term ascended master. I see where you're saying, and unlike a lot of people that would just automatically say, I'm done with the show. Um, I'm seeing an interesting aspect that you're actually helping me see something is that yes, there we are his creation. So when Cain slew his brother Abel, there's a phrase that he said to him, I hear your brother's blood crying out from the earth. Why? Because he's acknowledging, he's like, we think that our DNA, blood and DNA is just like whatever, but it's a part of what he's put into us. It's part of a life force. And he feels that when that goes into the earth, it breaks his heart. So when we're going to war with each other and all this stuff, um, we're very much hurting him. Now, I would argue that the other side, the demonic aspect, the fallen angels, Satan, whatever categories we want to go in with the tier levels of warfare, that they would be trying to pull away from acknowledging Creator God as and making us think that we're all our own gods, like Lucifer. That was a similar lie, it's just making you all think you're all your own gods. Whereas the other one is a humility of accepting a father's son in the sense of I get it. This requires I have to wash somebody's feet. This requires that I have to start emulating humility to the point where you get in Peter that the world asks of the faith that is within you. It's not just something you're going through the rituals and traditions of men, religion, like you emphasize. That's what Kabbalah translates to. And he was condemning the Pharisees always over. Um, but he wants it to be greater is he that is within you. He wants you to be this priesthood. I think what I'm trying to say is where would you say you divide the line of the creation pulling away as opposed to like because everybody's looking, but a lot of people seem to be lost. A lot of people seem to be angry. A lot of people seem to be buying the lie. And I think a lot of people can think, well, if I can become my own God, what's the point of acknowledging God himself? So it becomes a little bit of a Gnostic, narcissistic perspective and outlook of, well, if I can already do it, what do I need you for? Whereas the other one is saying, I need you because I created you and I love you, that I want you to come back up here and replace the ones that hurt me and broke my heart and came down and pulled everybody away. What would be your explanation for that kind of thinking?
Okay, so firstly, we have to go back a little bit in history and realize that the Bible itself is actually a collection of other ancient scriptures. So the Bible is made up of stories out of the Sumerian tablets, is also made up of things out of the Mahabharata, is made up of some of the Upanishads, and some of things in the Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and also the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's actually an amalgamation of different scriptures. So what has happened is that the Bible itself that we have today has been written in a narrative. So, for example, I'll come back to your question just to give context on my point.
Right, absolutely.
There are two stories. One story is the flood story in Genesis, and that story is a direct carbon copy of the story of Zayasudra, or also known as Atrahasis. Now, that translates to Atrahasis, translates to saved man. And that story is when Enki went to Zayasudra and told him that a flood was going to come. And what he did is that so that he wouldn't be found out to have, to keep his word to the Anunnaki that he wasn't going to tell humanity, he hid behind a wall so that Zayasudra couldn't see that it was him telling, and Enki telling Zayasudra about the flood. And he told Zayasudra to build a vessel, right? And it was going to be airtight. He told him to use bitumen to seal it, to make it airtight, collect food, gather your family, etc. Now that would more or less look like a submarine, right? That story is in the Bible of Noah and the flood was taken directly from the Sumerian tablets, which are the oldest information we have on Earth that talk about a time 450,000 years ago. Cuneiform is the oldest writing system, and our society is built on the society that the Sumerians had. Another story that is very famous in the Bible is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. That story was actually taken on the Sumerian tablets again when the Anunnaki went to war with Marduk and they tried to kill him. And they dropped nuclear weapons in that area in Mesopotamia to try to kill him. And this is why it said that there was a nuclear wind that passed and basically is what wiped out Sumeria, right? Because it killed out all their people, right? Now, this is why you have the story of Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt, but that was actually nuclear wind. And in that area where they dropped the nuclear weapons, which is in between Syria and Iraq, if you scratch the surface under the sand, you will find glass, which only turns to glass under extreme temperatures like 2,000 or 3,000 degrees Celsius, extremely hot, right? And there's still high radiation levels in that area. Yeah. Now, there's another place where you can confirm an event like that, and that's in a place called Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan, where if people check it out, you will see that people were basically mummified after nuclear weapons were dropped, where animals and people are still whole. You have people like on stairways that have just been vaporized, basically vaporized. And in that area still, there's high levels of radiation. So I said all that to say is that the stories in the Bible are written with a narrative taken from the original texts, which are the sources like the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Book of the Dead, and the Sumerian tablets, right? So I would say all that to say is that we can't look at everything in the Bible as 100% true, but what we can do is look at the information in there and decrypt the hidden stories through using other books to see where the original stories came. So in terms of like Christ, when you talk God dying and stuff like that, what we fail to realize is that the office of Christ is an ascension process that we are going through right now. And when you go through that process, you become the God man. You have all the powers of God. But what it is now is that we what we've been conditioned to think is that, okay, in terms of like how these beings that are not so benevolent and don't really love us, the Anunnaki have tricked us to separate us from source. So this is why the narrative of us being our own gods, what they've done is they've taken something that's true and pure, where we are our gods.
Yeah.
We are all gods, because even Christ said to the Pharisees, isn't it in your scripture it says that ye are gods? And he is referencing in the Old Testament, I think from memory it's Psalms 82, right? And I think from memory it goes, as God was sitting around the round table of the mighty, which was the Anunnaki, he says, how long shall you persecute the weak? And he said, because ye are gods, right? But what it is now is that understanding that we are gods, which is we are all gods with a small g, that is one with the big G, which is the creator of the universe. But what has happened is that they've played on that part now and distorted it to make us very narcissistic, very selfish. Oh, well, I can do all of this. I don't need the Father. This is why, if you realize, every time Christ spoke, he never took anything from himself. He always said, it is through the Father. Through the Father. Without the Father, I can do nothing. Right? He's acknowledging the presence of the Father, Mother in him. This is why he spoke through the I am. He never claimed anything for himself. Christ never said, oh, bow down and worship me, or I can do this, I can do it. He never, ever, ever took anything on himself. He always gave recognition to the Father.
Right.
But what has happened is that the concept of us being gods has been distorted and twisted, just like you were saying, to make us like go away from the Father. We can't actually separate from him, because you can't separate from what you are. But what we've done is that in our minds and consciousness, we've separated. So because in our minds, we think we're separated, we become separated. You understand? Because that's the veil that you're talking about. That's the veil of illusion that's been put in front of us to make us think in separation, right?
Right.
But you can't separate from something that you are. But what you can do is you can deny it. And this is the state of the entire planet. All of us, we have denied the fact that we are God, and through God in us, we can do magnificent things. So what they've done is they just distorted, because let me show you something here now. Have you ever watched that movie called Lucy? It's a very old movie. Basically, Lucy, she had eaten or ingested some material, and it allowed her to use 100% of her brain.
Oh, is that the one with Morgan Freeman?
I can't remember.
Morgan Freeman and Scarlett Johansson?
Yes, Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah.
No, let me show you some allegory in that movie, because they tell us the truth in the movies and they tell us the lies in schools.
Right.
So you remember when Scarlett Johansson was being shown, she said that, I can't remember the exact words that were told to her, but he says, because I can't remember, he says, they cannot create anything. But what they can do is distort anything that you create, right? Okay, so if you take that same logic, they cannot create a lie. They can't create anything, but they take the truth and distort it to their own frequency or their own pitch and narrative, and they tell us that, because they can't create something because there's no love inside of their hearts, because love is what makes creation. But because they have no love and they live in fear, they can't create. So what they do is that they manipulate us to create the reality that they want. So this is why we have in our media a lot of propaganda, because take what happened 3 years ago, right? Whether you want to believe in the pandemic or not, that's for people to believe. But let's look at the technology that we use. Very simple, repetition. So if you look at, we had graphics on screen, all the deaths going up per day, and we had, hey, Brandon, you're going to die. Gotta protect granny. You're gonna die. So say in the beginning you never believed, for example, right?
Yep.
After 100 days of hearing the same story, you would start to believe. Now let me prove my point in another way. Have you ever heard a song that when you first heard, you were like, "Oh my gosh, that's disgusting. That's terrible." And then 6 months later, you hear it in your car on your radio at a friend's house, and you find yourself singing along to it.
Mhm.
Good. The same technology, repetition, 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 repetition. So what these beings that rule the world have realized is that if they take something that's true, twist it, repeat it over and over and over again, the lie becomes the truth in our minds, which is why Joseph Goebbels, who was the chief propaganda person for the Nazis, actually said something along that lines in that
repeat a lie long enough, it becomes the truth.
Correct. So that's why I said that this is the nuance in terms of that, what you're saying is the situation, because what they've done is that they've taken the fact that all of us are God. We're co-creators. We are not the God that created the universe, but we're fractals of God containing the same attributes that we can create. We can do all these things. We can love just like the creator. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So we have the attributes. But what they've done is they've said, okay, they're gonna twist that, and everything, just instead of living in love, fear. Instead of having compassion, hate. So what they've done is they've twisted everything, and just like the same part that we all are gods, because don't forget, in the Bible and even in Nag Hammadi, it talks about the fallen angels were supposed to worship us, right? Because we would have the potential to be greater than them. And that's also shown in the Sumerian tablets as well, right?
So I actually like this talk. I can't say I agree 100% with the other texts, just personal. And the reason I would say that is I think it was a verse I pulled it up here. 2 Peter 1:21 says, "For prophecy came not by the will of man, but holy men of God, as they were moved by the Holy Spirit." And eventually we get the verse with I think it's John 1:14, that the word became flesh. And then so I see what you're saying. I can't say I agree necessarily with the word. I would change the word of not necessarily mini gods. I would say we were heirs according to the promise, because then that is biblical. But only if you acknowledge and humble yourself before the Father, because I and the Father are one. No man gets to the Father but by me. And we have that key aspect, like that classic Masonic painting or portrait. You might have seen it with the three pillars. You have the lady that's sitting at the top, and you have that's equivalent of the Babylon family. Semiramis, she's sitting under the sun, so that acknowledges Nimrod. And then you have him pointing up to the moon and stars, which is Semiramis, queen of the heavens. You have the guy in the middle holding an anchor, or the kid, and then he also holds a anchor in one and a key in another. And above that is the eye. So what is that? Like, well, in Masonry, an anchor means hope, and then he has the eye. So when the ascending hope is in him. And when the towers went down, 9/11, towers go down, and then the third tower, which is wisdom, right between the two, enlightenment. And again, even with 9/11, it represents duality. So I would say that was like the Antichrist figure was coming about when that happened. I mean, you even add up 365 days out of the year. It's supposed to be 13 moon cycles. You get 3 and 6, 9, 6 and 5, 11, 9, 11. Guys, come on. At a certain point, they know what they're doing. They're trying to invert everything. And I do agree with what you're saying, is that the lie is to make you forget that you have potential of becoming heirs according to the promise of the stuff that's laid out in the Bible. But a lot of people, instead of saying, I acknowledge that I have to humble myself before a creator, they're instead inverting that. We're saying, well, I can become my own God, so I don't need to have any reverence for said God. So yeah, I would use the term heirs as opposed to gods. Otherwise, I see what you're saying. Spiritually speaking, I really get that connection that you're making there. As for saying the Bible is entirely taken from other books, there is a lot of stories. I bought, was it Myths-Made Legends or Myths-Made Facts, something like that, and it talks about all the parody of mythology throughout all the different cultures, and every single culture seems to have the mythos of the Great Flood. There's one in India. There's another one that from the Australian Aborigines. There seems to be a consistent narrative. I think even the Book of Gilgamesh speaks of Gilgamesh going back through time and experiencing the flood. Um, is there any thought with that being said that perhaps the Bible was coinciding and it existed and it was in presence of all this stuff? Do you think that there is a potential that there was an original narrative and there were parodies going on alongside of that with equivalents and variants off of Babel? And because of the languages were confused, they still speak to themselves through signs and symbolism and try to invert everything so people can't find that one key truth of coming back to Creator God. Because from what I'm seeing is that, yes, he does want us to come back to him, but that's going to require going in through the sun because you can't get in otherwise. And a lot of people aren't acknowledging that I need to humble myself before Christ. What would be your thoughts with that?
Okay, so the reason why I said that the stories in the Bible are just mere carbon copies
Mhm.
is because to date, the oldest records we have on Earth are the Sumerian tablets. That is a fact that we have today. Until we find older records, those are the oldest that are approximately 5,500 years ago. These tablets appear to be copies of texts and stories that have been told throughout time because they talk about a time 450,000 years ago. The second oldest sets of information we have would be the Hindu Vedas, right? And those are written in another old language called Sanskrit. So the Sumerian tablets are written in cuneiform, which is the oldest writing system we have on Earth. That's a fact. Until we find other records, this is what we go by. So what I would say is, I caveat what I say is that until we find older records, until we find other things that supersede that age, this is what we have to go by, right?
Right.
So there's the caveat I would say, so that if tomorrow we find something 10,000 years old, then we would have to look to that because it's older, right?
Mm.
So the stories that are in the Bible, and I gave two, are actually copies that came out of the original Sumerian tablets. And then there are other stories that, and don't forget, the Jewish records are only about 4,000, I think 3,500 years old, something like that, in total length. The Vedas are older. So we have the Sumerian tablets, the Vedas, and then Jewish scripture. So the reason why I said that they're copies is that, well, because of age, because, they're older. And when you read the Sumerian tablets and other texts, we can understand that what is being talked about in the Sumerian tablets was a global civilization, but it was mostly focused on Mesopotamia. Now, we don't know why, but for some reason, Mesopotamia was the area that they chose. And it would appear that it's because of the existence of water, because there's something called the Fertile Crescent, which is the Tigris, the Euphrates, and then you have the River Nile on the other side in Africa, Egypt. And this is where most of the activities came about. And we can see that the knowledge from the Sumerians times, because I would argue that when in the Timaeus and the Critias, which is Plato's writings, he talked about Atlantis. So when you put all of this information together, it appears that Atlantis wasn't just a place that we think is in Mauritania or just off of the coast of Gibraltar. It appears to be a global society, a global consciousness, or global, because if you look at it, we have places in Lake Von, right, which is in Turkey. We have pyramids and statues under the river, not on the river, under the sea by Egypt, right? That are older, or well, I shouldn't say older, but are just as old, but they're underwater, which would confirm that that area would had to have been above water at a time. And because of the flood, there have been at least two floods, two great floods around the planet that reset humanity. So to the point that you made, we have the Japanese and the Chinese, their mythology talks about a great flood. The Aborigines talk about a great flood. We have the Hopi and Navajo on your side of the border that talks about the great flood. And we have a tribe in West Africa called the Dogon, which also talk about great flood. And they had serpent gods. Now, I think you were touched briefly on the serpent, but the serpent is not what people think it is. And the serpent is the giver of knowledge. It represents wisdom, right? And it's not necessarily something bad. Now, what has been done is that it has been twisted to appear to be bad. Just again, like everything that's out there, they've inverted. So we've been made to think that serpents are bad, but the serpent is an ancient symbol for knowledge. This is why pharaohs had serpents on their headdress. We had the Dogons as well that had serpent gods on their headdress. We had even and the Romans before they had, and so the Druids, which were in Ireland, that on their headdress they had serpents. So again, signs and symbols are what rule the world. And like you rightly said, they communicate through symbols. We've been taught to think just in words and pretty pictures, but they use symbology, and the symbology and the numerology that you used for 9/11 is what they use to bring in events, because they know sacred geometry, they know numerology, so they plan events to occur on these days to usher in certain types of energy on the plant and to create narratives and do false flags, etc. So this is why I was saying that we can't look at everything in the Bible as 100% truth. It is true in the sense that it is a story or a play on words or it's allegory, but it's not all truth, because Bible was actually written by Baal. This is why Baal is Marduk, by Baal, Bible by Baal. A lot of people will push back on that, but again, we have to look at etymology, which is the root of words, the study of words, and we look at what it is. Because when you go back to the Sumerian tablets, Marduk, Baal, he went to war with the Anunnaki, and they used nuclear bombs and weapons to try to kill him. They did not succeed. So in order to have peace, what they did is that they let him become the leader, because how they used to do it is that they used to read the stars and they would rotate leadership from one change of star sign to the next. Marduk read the stars incorrectly, and he said it's his time to rule. They said no, so he went to war with them, right? This is why you had a lot of wars in the Old Testament, because if you think about it, the Anunnaki are like a family, just like any family, right? They are the ruling class, but they never actually fought against themselves personally. They got us, the minions, to do it. Yeah. So what they did is that they sit in their armchairs, they get in their servants, which is us, through religion, whether it's the religion of government, the religion of money, or organized religion. This is why I say that they use these three religions to control the planet, and they're fighting and killing each other for them. They don't do anything. Now, and what will happen is that you will find that enemies sometimes would team up with one another to fight another enemy, and then they will go back being enemies against themselves and fight against one another. It's because they have one plan, and that is domination of the planet. So, but they are still fighting to be the rule of the one, which is where you have like the allegory in the Lord of the Rings, right? So one ring to rule them all, and they're all fighting over the one ring to rule all of us, right? So This is why I say that you can't look at everything as being 100% true in the Bible, because there have been plays on words, complete redactions, complete insertions of words to create narratives. Now, in the Bible, there's a very interesting phenomenon. And what it is that they have a lot of play on words like Lord. Lord actually means master.
Yeah.
And there are many gods in the Old Testament and in the Bible in general, because all of these stories came out of the Sumerian tablets and other texts. So when you go to look at the Hebrew, for when you were talking about the creator of all things, that word is theos, right? And I can't remember off memory now what is the other word, but it was actually written in a small t, right? And it was definitely a difference between the two, right? And a lot of times when you would think Yahweh was actually Enlil. We know that because he was Lord of Air, Lord of Command. His symbol was the eagle. The eagle is the king of the air, and all of the what should I say, the countries that there are many countries on planet Earth that use the eagle as part of their crest or flag, and most of those countries are very warring countries, right? So, and then when you look at the symbols and the symbology, it was really Enlil calling the shots. But Marduk, Nanarsin, and all the others be still fighting, infiltrating each other's religion to get dominance. So this is why when Moses went to Mount Sinai, when he came back down with the tablets, he saw the people worshiping the golden calf. The calf is symbology for Marduk, because he used the calf as one of his symbols, the bull, right?
Strength, mortality, kingship, yeah.
Right. So he infiltrated his uncle's cult, right? Religion, whatever you want to call it, to try to put his religion as the one and sabotage it, right? So there's why Moses ordered the destruction of the golden calf, because this was them trying to purge Marduk out of their religion. So this is why I say that we can't look at everything as 100% true. But what we have to do is we have to look at a lot of other texts to supplement what is the real story, right? Because, again, these books have been written by men, right? And they've been written with an agenda, and the agenda is to keep us mentally enslaved, to keep us fighting one another, to cause division and separation amongst man, so that we don't realize our divinity, to realize that we become the Christ, right? We are the sons of man, right? So whether you want to use that term or use gods with a small g or heirs, it's the same thing, to be honest. It's just a difference in words. Like, you can call it the kundalini inside of you. You can call it the spirit inside of you. You can call it finding the kingdom within you. Whatever. It's all the same thing. You call it Christ or the Krishna, because, again, Christ and Krishna is the same thing. Whatever word you want to use, what I would suggest to people is that we don't get so focused on necessarily like these small little details, but we need to expand out and look at the bigger picture and realize that we're being played. And what we need to do is share more information and not be so dogmatic about our things, because someone can show me something, I can go and research it. Hold on a minute, you know what? That person got a point. Thank you very much. I'll put that into how we express, right? But we tend to have very dogmatic beliefs and viewpoints, which is why we have the left-right paradigm. We have Judaism versus Christianity, Christianity versus Islam. We have my God is better than your God. But we're all being played, right? And all we're doing is killing each other out and then leaving us weak. And this is why Christ talked about the church of Philadelphia, which is lukewarm, which is neither following or not following. It's just enough to get people to be roped in, and then just enough lies, you know what I mean, to stray you away from the message. You know what I'm saying?
I was just doing a show earlier today, and I was talking about because he had a thing where he was going to Salem and he started talking to some people that were street preachers and they're dressed like Christ, stuff like that. And he was starting to give his personal sentiments of what was going on over in Gaza. And they didn't understand where he was coming from. And I was congratulating him because I said that's part of the reason why I was inspired to give this presentation today. Because a lot of Christians, they use the adjective, but they're not living it. They don't know what a Holy Spirit is. And I would say, if, like the parable of the bridesmaids, if you had to break that down, it's five of them understood oil. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet. You have to apply it. But they said five of them forgot their oil. They fell asleep. And what happened? They had to go run back home, get the oil. Then they came back. They're knocking on the door and they're like, what? We're here for the no. You had a job to hold the light, point the way, and you guys dropped your post. Get out of here. I don't know you. And I think I can connect partially with what your viewpoint is. I really like the way you worded it. I think it's kind of sad in a sense that, yes, I think originally creation, it was laid out where we did have I was already a connection. What I would veer is the serpent, or the whatever you want to call Satan, the particular name for the angel that would, there was a seraphim, I think, that had a serpent-like structure, and they were one of the guardians of the throne of heaven. He comes down and he's already starting right from the beginning, is that, you don't really need the guy up there if you eat it, and even the reason why we have the suspicion that it was a apple that she ate was because when you cut the apple in half, it's like the Pythagorean 5 points of man, three representing the male with the extra digit, and then two female. So we get the pentagram, or the sigil of Astaroth. And I think that's kind of what's happened and evolved, is that ever since the beginning of time, he constantly has this struggle with Israel, is I am the one true God. And what do they constantly do? They keep incorporating all this other stuff. They're like, oh, we can bring a little. It's like it becomes like a buffet religion. Have a little of this, a little bit of that, and God's just like, no, just me. That's it. And I think the reason for even sending Christ would be, I love you so much, but this is my last. This is my last. This is the final one. I'm going to show you somebody how to do it. I want you to emulate his ways. I want you to try to recruit people back, because everybody else, they don't care. They become lovers of themselves. They become, as opposed to humbling, acknowledging that the Creator gave them life. That you had this ancestral connection originally with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and you guys have strayed farther and farther away. I mean, Christ himself was bought for the price of an ongoing slave at that time and age. And what happened? He died as a slave to set the slaves free from their sin, or the people that were missing the mark. I think it was Hermatia, I believe is what it's called in the original Greek, is that you've missed the mark, you've missed the arrow where it's supposed to hit on the target. I think a lot of people have veered off of that, and they don't want to acknowledge what salvation is. And I don't know if a lot of people would be accepting of it, because they've tapped into, what do you call it, concepts that are pulling them away from the truth. And there's only one truth, and narrow is the path, and few there'll be that'll find it. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. Do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make? I think we're getting close to like a 2-hour mark. I don't want to go excessively long.
Well, what I would say is that from my research, it looks like this has been purposely done. So the reason why I say that is that we have like these rise and falls of civilizations, and we've had at least 2 great floods on Earth, plus other cataclysms that have destroyed the Earth at times in our history. And what it looks like is that with every cataclysm or every reset, it appears that the consciousness of man gradually reduced. Because if you think about it, if you have a group of people that understand these things, right, then a catastrophe happens, and a huge percentage of those people that had the knowledge died out and didn't survive. So then now that knowledge will have to be taught to the younger generation, right? So the older generation will end up dying out. But then no, the original people that had the knowledge, because they died out, when there was another cataclysm, whether it was by fire or ice or flood, etc., whatever, more people died out. So what happened is that gradually, the consciousness of man lowered. And this part here, I'm interpreting from the text. It looks like the Anunnaki played on these facts and then gradually steered us away from the truth so that we would worship them. Because the Sumerian kings list, there were 8 immortal kings that ruled for a total of 241,200 years. And we know that these kings were most likely either Anunnaki themselves, or they were the Homo sapiens sapien that were created from the Anunnaki when they put their essence into the hominids. So this is why they were able to live for extremely long times. But what happened is that they started to realize, hold on a minute, these guys are living too long. How are we going to get them to worship us? So there was a cataclysm. They knew about the cataclysm and they played on that fact. So they had to restart Earth. So the story was telling you that if a group die out, then, that old knowledge will be gradually lost. And there's another thing that happened. In the tablets, they say that they did genetic modifications to us about 200 to 250,000 years ago, right? What they did is that they fused chromosome 2 and they capped our telomeres. And that is directly responsible for our lifespan becoming reduced. So when you look at the Sumerian tablets, and it's after the last immortal king, it said, and then there was the flood. And then Kish, that whole dynasty started to come in. And they were significantly shorter. 1,500 years from memory was the maximum lifespan that they had. And after that point, it just gradually got less and less and less and less and less. Now, medical science has shown that because we share about 98% of the DNA with primates and those species, right? When they look at the genome of humans and the primates, orangutans, etc., there is something different in humans than all of them. And that is chromosome 2 being fused and the telomeres being capped. And science has said that modification is not natural and it was done. It was actually done to us. It is not part of our evolutionary process. It was actually physically done somehow. So what is in the text is being confirmed by science that happened. And the scientists have said that happened circa 200,000 years ago, right? So what that does as well is that blows the myth that we're only 6,000 years old and society is only from that time, because we're going according to the basis of Christianity, or the Abrahamic religions, I should say, that all of this, that where we are now, started 6,000 years ago. No, there have been beings much, much longer than us, but there are ancestors, and it's through genetic modification and manipulation that they've basically tapped our ability to live long. And think about it, if you live for shorter periods in time, you will not be able to reach high levels of consciousness, because as soon as you're starting to sort of figure out this life thing, boom, you're dead, right? You reincarnate again, and then you come and do it again, your memory is wiped. You have to keep going through pain and trying to learn the lessons of life. But if you're living for 28,000 years, after maybe 5,000 years, you're kind of like, you know what? I see patterns in my life of how I've been making the same mistakes for 5,000 years, for example, right? So this is why they had bigger brains They had bigger craniums to hold the brain matter. They had ancient geometry, and I mean ancient knowledge to map the stars, you know what I mean, to do high level mathematics, the golden ratio, pi, the foot, the meter, centimeters. All of this came from our ancestors, you know, and we think we're discovering it, but it was there all along. So this is why I say that I think that is a bit of bad luck where we had resets, but also manipulating on those resets to lower the consciousness of man, which made it easier for us to enslave. So where we're at now is that we're completely is mad because we have access to so much information at our fingertips through our smartphones and computers, but we're actually on a consciousness level very ignorant. We lack knowledge.
Style.
I would actually use the word and say we're a bit dumb as a collective, right? Where we don't understand things. And it's mad because the stuff I'm talking about is out there in the public domain that you can go and research and read books and, you know what I mean, watch documentaries, etc. But no one does any of that. All we are now is addicted to our smartphones due to the dopamine that we get when we get a new message or we get a new notification or we get someone that liked our post. And there's a mad phenomenon that we see in like girls, not all girls, obviously, but some girls. Say a girl uploads a photo to Instagram and she got 500 likes today. And she uploads a photo or video or whatever, and she only gets 100. She's going to delete that and try to upload another one to get circa those 500 likes, right? And what we're doing now is that we're basing reality on what we're seeing on the screen, right? And this is why I say, some people disagree with me, but that's fine. I say that the matrix, we live in a matrix. I do wholeheartedly understand that. But the social media is the matrix because some people live on Instagram or social media for so many hours during the day that they believe that that is real. And I came across a video yesterday that I shared with some friends of mine. You know that there are places in China and some other Asian countries that you have like a school to become an influencer, and they give
I saw that.
you know, it's mad. They give you like facilities for you to be able to create your content. You have your ring lights and you're just sitting down there talking. And I'm like, wow. So what people fail to realize is that most things they see on social media, like content creators, is not real, right? And most people are trying to portray an image about how great their life is, how happy they are, how well they're doing financially, etc., etc., etc. And we now are looking at those posts and basing our life on that. So we feel inadequate about yourself. So instead of looking for the nirvana inside of us, like Buddha says, looking for the middle way, you know, the middle path, or looking to go through, if you look at the Hermes staff, which is the caduceus, and you see the two twisted serpents, and you see the staff through the middle, and at the top of the staff, there's a crown, and there's wings, which represents your illumination. But the path to get to illumination is the middle path, right? Now, I just used 3 situations to describe the same thing. One was from Buddha, one was through Hermes, and the next one was through Christ. It's the same thing, just slightly different flavor, slightly different wording, slightly different appearance. But we're looking to solve an internal problem from the outside. So we're failing to realize that to solve the internal problem we solve on the inside, so we're being distracted to follow all the latest trends on social media, to believe, because what has happened now is that, kind of like what you were saying, a lot of influence on influencers now, people look at them as like God. They're almost like God. So everything that comes out of these people's mouths, people believe, right? And it was mad. I went to a networking event on Friday. This is the first time I've ever seen anything like this. Obviously, I know it happens, but like me personally experience it. And I was there, chatting with some friends, and I see this girl with a selfie stick and taking videos and stuff. I was like, that's a bit random. So I said to myself, I just went and talked with her. I mean, pretty girl and everything. I said, hey, um, yeah, you making content for, like, you have a YouTube channel or something? She says, no, I'm an influencer. Now, I personally don't even like that word influencer because
Right.
to me personally, that's a nothing term.
Right.
Because if you think I'm influencing people, okay, good. But influencing them to do what?
Right.
What are you teaching them?
Right.
Right? Like, I would say if I had children, I would be an influencer to my children because of the things that I'm trying to teach them. So I'm trying to influence them and teach them things. So I don't even like that term influencer. I digress. But she was telling me, so I was trying to figure out, okay, if you're an influencer, so I was trying to ask some questions here. So I was trying to figure out. I said, so if you're an influencer, like, how do you make your money? And I think that no one has ever really asked her that question. But she says, oh, well, and she couldn't really articulate. So I helped her. So I said, so do you have, like, are you affiliated with brands? Do you sell clothing, or do you, like, model clothing and get people to buy? Then she was like, oh, yes, I work with people and I would, like, have brands and I would, like, publicize their products, etc., etc. And I was like, imagine this is this girl's livelihood and she can't even explain to me what she actually really does. And I'm like, she calls herself an influencer. I was like, gosh damn, like, is this how far we've come now? Where
Can't even know. Yeah.
we worship people that we see in social media. We believe that what we see in social media is real. And I'll be honest with you, from talking to her, she has zero personality, right? And I'm like, wow, we are literally living in the last days now,
Yeah.
where this is the worship of man. And we may not be physically saying, oh, Brandon, my God, you know what I mean? How can I serve you today? But in our actions, we are worshiping them, right? And this is the sad reality of where we are now. So this is why I do podcasts like this. I try to teach people, inform them, educate them. And obviously, I would say that I know that people don't agree with everything I say. But what I would say is that my goal is to get people to ask questions, to question the narrative. Because at the end of the day, even if you are in a relationship with a person, you will never agree with them 100%, right? Even your own parents,
Yeah.
you don't agree with everything, right? So I don't expect people to believe, but what I try to do is lift up a rock and say, hey, you may want to look here, or open the door and say, hey, you may want to look through there, right? So my job is more to questions.
Sorry, you went completely mute for a split second when you went right into explaining that part.
Right. So I was saying that my what I try to do is to get people to ask questions, to question the narrative, to lift up the rock and say, hey, you may want to look there, or open, or make the door a bit ajar and say, hey, you may want to look through there, and then get people to go and look for things themselves. Because I don't want people to say, oh, I'm just going to believe everything Todd says because he sounds really nice and blah, blah, blah. Go and look for these things yourself,
Yes.
Don't believe what I say. Go and find out, because you may see a different side that I didn't see. Because the thing is that a coin has three sides: the bottom, the top, and the actual thickness, which is another side, right? So what it is now is that I could be holding up this.
Mm-hmm.
So on this side, you're seeing red. On my side, I'm seeing black because it's a screen. But we both are actually telling the truth. We're both actually true. But what it is that on my side, it looks different from on your side. So this is why I tell people to do research themselves, because there may be another side that I've not seen or you've not seen, and that you can teach us and teach others.
Right.
So this is why I try to say to people that you can't be dogmatic in your view of things and how you speak. I always leave some room for if there's error or a different interpretation. because, you know what I mean, we all can see things differently, right?
Yeah.
And we have different interpretations. And it may not necessarily mean that my interpretation is wrong or yours is wrong. We could actually be saying the same thing, but we
Mhm.
just use different words, right?
Right.
Because as Christ said, my flock know it's me because they hear my voice. So your flock would hear you because of your voice, what you say. My flock would hear me because of my voice and what I say. But the funny thing is that both of us might actually be saying the exact same message, but said slightly different. So you
Right.
could have
But it reaches
pasta
a different
with tomato sauce or pasta with white sauce,
Yeah.
with mushrooms, right? So, you know what I mean? It's still pasta, but just different flavors. So that's why I try to tell people don't get so bogged down on like a religion or what you think is true. Go and research for yourself, go and read, question, question things I say, question things you say, look
Right.
at some of the source materials and learn, because we need to be spreading the overall message of love, harmony, and that we're really one mind, one body, one spirit, one consciousness. We all are one, right? And we until we realize that we're actually one, right? Then we're not going to be able to change the situation we have on Earth, because we are under attack.
Yeah.
Our overlords hate us and they want to cull us. They want to kill us out. And what we are doing is that we're killing each other. So we're doing their dirty work for them. And then when we are exhausted and tired, all of the resources, they're going to come and enslave us
Yeah.
in a way that we're never going to be able to escape ever again. So what we need to do is wake up and realize we have a common enemy. We may not like each other, but we can agree to help each other because we need to push back against what's happening to us. And then in due time, we may actually realize, hold on a minute, that guy Brandon, he's not a bad guy after all. That guy Todd, he's not a bad guy after all. He may think differently from me, but he has a good heart, right? And this is what we need to do. We need to work together. We need to support our small creators, people that they're putting themselves out there for the attacks, because speaking these things, you will get attacked
Oh,
from
yeah.
everyone. From everyone. You will not be liked because you will piss off some side. But, you put on your iron shirt and you accept it. You just do your best. Be humble, be kind, speak your truth, be resolute in what you say, and forget the rest, And I think that this is something that's very important and is lacking today.
Sure. Well, Todd, thank you for coming on. I have to say, my favorite part is your metaphors and analogies. I really appreciate that by way of parable. I don't think a lot of people know how to embrace and articulate as well as you have today. Like you said, I may not have agreed, but I really appreciated, as opposed to a lot of people are just saying, well, I just believe it because, you actually were giving examples of explaining how you came to the reason of what you believe and how you believe and how you see and perceive the world around you. So I really appreciate that. I can't acknowledge that enough. That's something I don't think a lot of teachers, people in general, like you said, like the influencer, they're very shallow. There's no depth. They're one dimension. They don't know how to articulate and explain why. I think the greatest question of mankind is asking the question why, like Socrates did. And that caused a ripple effect because he was making all of the culture of the young men of Greece go why, and just shut up, don't ask questions, just comply. And I think if people aren't asking that question why, I have to ask you, why not? And I think, like you said, I think intelligent people thrive off the ignorance of others. It's like, I'm not smarter than you. I read more than you. That's what makes me intelligent. It's not because I'm better. It's not because I'm greater than you. I think a great thing to add to what you said is, like you said, humility. Um, Humbly try to understand where the other person's coming from and try to find a middle ground so that you can come to a core common truth of the truth and the life. So, Todd, again, thank you for coming on. Maybe we can have another chat at some point. Anything else you want to say? Anything you want to plug in? I know you said you're not exactly into podcasting officially, but is there anything you're aspirations down the road that you like to throw out for people to look into?
Yes, so I do podcasts out of love because I've realized that I have certain gifts in terms of being able to speak in public and to be able to articulate my points in a certain way. And but on a daily, what I do day to day is that I am a online fitness trainer. I help spiritually inclined people burn fat and build muscle. And I also teach a lot of these things to the people that I coach because I realized that you can't just try to coach someone to get in shape. And the reason is that we're a mind, body, spirit complex. So you have to coach the person in all three aspects. So I help improve people's mindset. Um, I work on help people to reprogram their beliefs and their belief systems about themselves. And also, I teach them how to eat, how to get in shape, doing some really cool exercises. And also, I've just recently teamed up with a company that does magic mushrooms. Because one of the reasons why I've been able to understand many things on the way I've done is that I have done a lot of medicine, so psychedelics and stuff. And what it is now is that psychedelics have been given a very bad name by some people, but in reality, when you look at them, you don't actually go crazy from psychedelics, you go sane. And what it does is that they humble you to realize that actually you are the one that self sabotage, you're the one that creates all the issues in your life through projecting your fears and traumas onto other people. So they definitely help with introspection because they help you to find, that little child inside of you, the kingdom within, the nirvana. They help you to find that path because we have receptors in our brain for things like psilocybin, which is psilocin, which is the active ingredients of mushrooms, ayahuasca, bufo alvares. We have DMT receptors in our brain, and we know that DMT is produced in the largest amounts during childbirth and during death. So this is why people that have near-death experiences always come back and talk about like seeing through the veil because large amounts of DMT was released into their body, so they have like out-of-body experiences, and that is basically you're going into the spirit world. And when you actually go into the spirit world while you sleep through your dreams. So what has become very clear to me is that the real reality is in the dream world. And this supposed physical awake reality is when we're sleeping. So this is why we get a lot of downloads and messages through dreams. We can see deja vu moments. We can see past lives sometimes. We can see a lot. So if anyone is interested in, any mushrooms and doing some work on themselves, they can always send me a message. My social medias are at Adriano_246 or my name on Facebook, Todd Cave, TODDCAVE. And I will be starting my own podcast very soon, where we'll be inviting some other guests and people like yourself to come on and give other dimensions, because I'm the conscious fitness guy who's into geopolitics and spirituality and medicines and all these so many different things, so it will really be a representation of who I am because I'm like a jack of all trades to be fair. But awesome. On the day I help people get into shape. So if the things that I spoke about resonated with you, or if you had any questions or anything like that, just drop me a message at Adriano_246. And if you also want to get into shape and get into the best shape of your life, also drop me a message and let's have a chat and see if I can help you. And I just want to say thanks for inviting me. And even though we didn't have a script, I really enjoyed this conversation because I must give you credit as well, where I speak to a lot of people that have different opinions than I do. And how should I say, a lot of them are very vitriolic in their replies to me, and they try to start attack my character and say
I
bad
hate when
things.
they
And
do that.
I just say, look, I will respectfully disagree, but I will listen to you, and you can express, and then we can talk about something else, right? And I must give credit to you as well, for being very respectful and allowing me to speak. And I do think you have some very good points, and I may not agree with some, but I think that
I'm
we,
never
we
gonna impose.
I think that we share a lot more in common than uncommon, and it's just the
Mhm.
little details. So this is just a lesson for people where what you do is you focus on the things you do agree on,
Yes.
and the things that you don't agree on, you don't put so much focus and energy on, and that way you can actually create good bonds, friendships, and have good conversation with people, because again, we have a common enemy, and we need to come together and work together. So that's why I say, support Brandon in what he does, listen to his podcast, and support me as well. I can help you in many different ways, and Brandon can teach you, because we have to support the smaller guys, because we're there putting ourselves on the line, taking all the attacks and the arrows from people shooting at us. And it's a tough path to walk, because what I mean, you always have haters, and you have to learn to ignore them and focus on the people that you're helping and are very appreciative of the work that you do. And not many of us can do that, but I would say that you are a straight up guy, and I would have zero problem in having a chat with you again and talking to some more other stuff. So many thanks for having me, and yeah, thanks to all your listeners for listening to me, and I hope that this talk added value to you. And on my Instagram as well, I have on my highlights, you have all the podcasts I've done, so you can listen to more of the things I speak about. And also another highlight called Books to Read, which are my source of information. Not all, but a vast majority, so you can understand how I think and where I get a lot of these ideas from.
Do that a lot with my shows. I'm like, don't take my word for it. Here's a book. Here's a website. Dig into it. So, all right, Todd. Thank you very much, guys. Man, a Daily Podcast, episode 2. Don't know when this is going to be dropping, but I will let you know. I'll send you a link. Catch you on the next one. Bye.